All right, we are recording. All right, so I thank you guys for coming. This is my final presentation for my EDA 614 class, finishing up my Rank 1 studies. So today what we're going to be talking about is closing the gap in the classroom through deliberate teaching from daily learning targets. And I'll explain why I chose this topic, because for 2 years, as Ms. Haycraft and Ms. Lovell know, I have worked on RTI in math. That's been my major study for the last couple of years. We saw a lot of growth, and even though I didn't add this to this last one, even this semester from that study, we have continued to see growth. And the reading has come up as well. So the kind of the implementation of certain little things, especially in the resource setting, we've seen a lot of growth from that. So what I wanted to do was take that positive and see how we can not only continue to add to that RTI process, but how to also benefit the regular ed classroom outside of the RTI setting. And something simple, and I know this was kind of a buzzword 2 or 3 years ago, but that was learning targets. So how can we take that information from RTI and add that into the gen ed setting and to any other classroom? And that was through learning targets. My team members, of course, myself, Ms. Lovell, Dustin Brumbaugh. Dr. Brumbaugh is my college professor, and he will be observing this. Ms. Haycraft, who is our guidance counselor, Ms. Hodson, who is the resource math teacher, and then Ms. Reed. She's not here today, but she's been a big part of getting me some numbers here and there for different questions I've had through the RTI process, and even a little bit through this, but she's been on this team as well. So who are we as Berea Community as a district? The school opened in 1969. We are a Leader in Me school. For those that don't know, that is the 7 habits of highly effective people and how you implement that into a school setting. In the high school, I didn't put the entire district or the middle and high, I just went with the high school. We have 346 kids enrolled in our high school. And then you can see the different numbers here of our dynamic: 5.7 Hispanic, 3.6 African American. We have the multiple races, 22, which this is kind of high. 22.7% are in their gifted and talented program. In the high school, we are at 15.3% special ed, but when you throw in the middle school, which I teach, we're up over, we're well above 20% in that. And this is just high school. I think we're pushing 80% to the entire district, but in the high school, we're at 72% free and reduced lunch. So what's the issue? Like I've already said, we have seen the improvement through our RTI process, or response to intervention, and how can a public school successfully teach a diverse body of students in an economical manner, and how do we quantify such success? So defining the problem here, like I said, I wanted to do something that wasn't going to be broad sweeping and be total change for people to implement. So I was like, hey, why can't we go back to the focus of learning targets? And our defining the problem was learning targets are not deliberate enough for individualized learning. You'll see some of the data that I have here in just a few minutes. And then also, I thought, even though this was our original RTI process, it also fits, if you want to get to the grand scheme of things, it also fits our CSIP goal for the high school, and that's percentage of the students scoring novice at the end of course assessments in English 2, biology, U.S. history, and algebra 2, even though the numbers that I really looked at in classrooms I looked at were math classes, especially in algebra 2 setting, and reduced that by 50%. So why is this an important research question? The ultimate goal of broad implementation, and I'm reading this directly from it, but I think it does little bit better job explaining it than what I can. Is the ultimate goal is broad implementation of learning targets and reducing the gap of diverse body of learners by simple structural teaching. To be plain and simple about that is when you walk into a classroom as a student, not as a teacher, not as an administrator, but as a student, do they know what they're going to do within the first 10-15 seconds of them walking into a classroom? If a student has that knowledge or is equipped with that knowledge, the success rate of learning increases. That's just like myself as a teacher or as a student in this program. If I know what is expected of me, if I know what my goals and objectives are, the odds of me being successful and building on any prior knowledge I have in the past, the odds of me building on that greatly increase. So I think there's nothing different for the students, and I think research shows that, and I've added that. The Hattie study shows that when students have an expectation and are kind of set on a path or a journey, then they know what's coming, then the odds of them learning or gaining knowledge, or not even gaining knowledge, but adding to the depth of knowledge they have greatly increases. So that's what we're looking at here. You can get it. The reviewing of the literature, and these are more kind of academic definitions, but the learning targets are short-term goals or statements. Your learning targets should clearly state what you expect students to know and be able to do at the end of a lesson. And that's just kind of what I explained just a few minutes ago. But if a student knows day to day what's expected of it, then once you get to the end of a unit, or you get to the end of a grading period, or you get to the end of a school year, especially with EOCs and those things going on, like I said, with the Algebra 2, the Biology, the English 2, if you get those, if you have those short-term goals, it's just like a building block. It's just like, my kid loves to play with Legos. If you put the little pieces on the bottom and then put the big ones on top, it just falls over. But if you give them that daily base, every day, not only do you have a foundation, finally at the end of it, you have a completed structure. So that's kind of a metaphor of the start of the school year is your foundation, so on and so on and so on, till year by year they graduate high school and go on to whatever they were, or whatever they choose to do, whether it's college or vocational school, job, whatever the case may be. But designing learning targets to enhance student achievement empowers teachers. I think that's something too that I think is, through what we have going and cycles we have going in education right now, a lot of teachers don't always necessarily feel empowered or know what's expected of them. When a teacher writes those learning, and you can see I've got some here in the corner, when a teacher has when they know what they're doing, they feel empowered to teach. They feel empowered to not only just present material and knowledge to students, but they have the ability to get in there and actually learn and help those students learn and grow. So it's real simple. A little statement like that goes a long way toward that student achievement. And then guided learning targets, teachers can partner with and that just goes back to what I just said, partner with their students during the formative learning cycle to gather evidence to raise the learning and achievements of the student. To me, that's very simple. If you have that objective written somewhere, and you have some kind of little exit slip or bell ringer from the previous day's information, you know very quickly, hey, does this student or does this group of students know what the lesson was about? Do they know what direction we're going? Do they know where we're headed next? So something very simple just like that is a very positive factor in a student's education. And again, it also leads to that RTI piece. If they're not getting those learning targets, well, what barriers in front of them? What do they need extra? What services do they need extra? It helps answer an initial set of questions to find out what a student really needs or what struggle they're having. So the review of literature continued here is a plan of implement effective instruction. And we'll get into those things here in just a minute once I get to the survey. And it says describe exactly what students will learn and how well will they learn it and what they will do to demonstrate that learning. It goes back to those simple exit slips at the end of a period. Something I use as a special ed teacher when we're doing vocabulary or skills or sentence structure. It's raise your hand if you understand what we just did. Yes, no. That's a quick formative way to figure out, hey, are my kids understanding that target? And use their knowledge of typical or not so typical student progress to scaffold increased student understanding. It goes back to just everything I said. Based off that, and I have this one written up here. It says I can use technology to understand key vocabulary terms. And even though that's very broad and that's very basic, if my kids can't understand that, then I know I probably have to go back and reteach some things, or there may be specific sets of skills that maybe I didn't present well, or maybe it's something where the student may have a disability and may not be picking up on something. And establish teacher look-fors, obvious and direct instructional guides. Are they meeting curriculum? Are they meeting standard? And then taking that information and translating that success criteria into student look-fors that promote the development of assessment-capable students. So basically, taking the information from your learning targets and being able to assess student learning based off that one clear or two or three clear examples of what you're covering. And this is something, the formative learning cycle, guys, and this is something that I don't think we covered this in our district, but it's something that I don't think gets driven home enough sometimes. And that is, right here is your lesson. Okay, that's your daily lesson. Model and explain. I'm going to sit here and teach whatever it is, in this case math. And let's say I'm teaching two-step equations. I will model that. I'll explain why we do that. I'll explain when we either start off with multiplication, division, whatever. And then we will practice that. And then based off that, their performance of understanding. That can be a quick exit slip, that can be an actual test, that can be a unit test, whatever the case may be. And here's one that I think needs to happen more. I think we as a school have done a pretty good job with this, but something I think sometimes we forget about, and that's giving that formative feedback. Okay, if I give a kid a test and they get a C on it, okay, I just hand it back to them. That's it. They give it to their parent. Okay, what's the cause of that? Why did they get that C? Why didn't they get that A or B that they wanted? Give them feedback. Show them where they made mistakes. Show them where they can improve. Show them what little sub-skill of that two-step equation, whether it's the multiplication, division, subtraction, whatever, where are they struggling, and then show them, hey, you're doing a good job up until this final point. Now let's work on that, and maybe that can give a better sense of knowledge for that student, so they can build on to the next section, unit, test, whatever the case may be, and then that improves performance. And then you just, it's a cycle. So you just keep doing that. But the big thing to me is that formative feedback piece here. All right, no matter what you're doing, if you're not giving people feedback, or you just pass them along, what's going on there? So, and then this continue with the literature piece. It says guided by learning targets and teachers partner with students. Guys, I think that's something that I know for a fact I can improve on that, and I'm sure after going through several classrooms, I think we're right there at the cusp of really getting into it. But that's something I think we all need to improve on. What I mean by that guided learning targets, teachers can partner with students, is just what I got finished explaining to you, is finding those weak areas, and then trying to, whether you're reteaching a piece of it, whether you are referring a kid maybe to some seminar or RTI piece, whatever the case may be, you can do that. So I think that is something that needs to continue to be looked at. Will you close that door? And then compare where they are to where they need to go. Again, that's part of that assessment piece, and that continually looking at student achievement is okay. What are you doing well? What are you not doing so well? I think that's a simple piece, and I think we take that for granted sometimes, and don't always look back at the obvious information and things that we have, and then choosing effective strategies to teach those goals. That, to me, that's the big piece, and that's what I've been working on for the last 2 years. Ms. Haycraft has probably seen a lot of that information, more of that information than what actually I have, but she continues to do that. And I know I've got Miss Guthrie here. She's done a really good job with the RTI piece this year, and building on that. I know with our reading numbers, at least from the special ed end of things, implementing those pieces such as Study Island. We also use Ames Web, some of those things, finding those little sub skills, that way we can using those strategies for kids to achieve, whether it's coming to grade level, in reading, math, whatever the case may be, and then assessing and adjust what they are doing. Goes back to everything we just said. Finding where their strengths and weaknesses are. We have to continually look at that. Instructional objectives and intended outcomes, and then learning target describes the intended lesson, size learning outcome to the nature of evidence that will determine mastery. Guys, it all goes back, whether it's, using these learning targets, that's just a small little step. But the amount of information that you can get if you're continually going back to those learning targets or I can statements, however you want to say it, that's that beginning piece. And if they can't master that one little sentence or a couple of sentences that you're writing every day, then you know that there's something that either you're not doing correctly or the students aren't grasping, and it allows you a lot of information to figure out what you're doing for your students. So let's see, what's next? And guys, this is something that we worked on early in the semester. This was to define a problem. We said learning targets are not deliberate enough for individualized learning. And why did I say? I'm going to tell you why I wrote this down. At the start of the semester, at that first faculty meeting of the year, I told you guys, hey, I'm going to be coming around. Looking, this isn't, I'm not going to report all this stuff to Miss Lovell and hand it to her, and I'm not doing this to get you in trouble. But when I went, I took about 2 weeks to go through classrooms. I did it during my planning period. I think I did it like six different times. I made it to everybody's classroom at least once, whether they really knew it or not. And the reason why I say not deliberate enough, you would be surprised how many teachers were not using them anymore, the basic learning targets. after we spent 2 years going over those. I mean, we did. We spent 2 years in our PLTs lining up our learning targets, lining up our assessments, all of those things. We spent a lot of time on it. So I was kind of shocked how many classrooms didn't have those in there still. So I was like, hey, that's an issue. So the method of instruction to broad to identify the weaknesses. These are my 5 whys. Method of instruction to identify areas of weakness. Well, why is that? Because testing data did not meet the desired outcomes we were wanting. Okay, well, why is that? Because we had very little intensive training or time investment for teachers. We had that at one time, but it's kind of gone by the wayside. It really has. In the last, we are in spring 2019. I don't remember, and of course I know we've kind of changed how we've done our PLTs now, but I've not really heard much on those. So no wonder that's kind of fallen off a little bit. So why is that? Administration has not effectively evaluated daily teaching methods. And I understand, I'm not trying to sit here and make our administration mad but if that's something that's not been the area of focus, of course it's going to finally kind of be put on the back burner. Well, and then why is that? Weekly PLCs can be used more deliberately across all academic settings and subjects. That's something I don't know why, and I've even made this suggestion is we've gone back to units and lesson plans and those things instead of just simply knowing our standards, and then based off that just having our targets based off the standards we know. You're getting the same thing accomplished, but you're adding more time to your teachers. You're adding more time planning that instead of planning, okay, this is the lesson today, let me get this, and this together. So I think we're kind of wasting a little bit of time on the actual teaching of our students, and putting too much time into those lesson plans. And as you know, it can be a Tuesday 5th period, and depending on what happened that Monday and early morning, you may scrap your whole week instead of just having those basic little learning targets already laid out that the students know from day one, we're doing this, and this. So take what you want from that, but that's what I really was looking at. Okay, the survey method, and I will say this: I had 29 people 29 teachers in our building reply, so I had great turnout on that. And you'll see the results of this. I've got the list of the questions, and I'll go over those, but I only showed the ones that I thought was really interesting. But the survey was to see if our teachers now have forgotten what the learning targets are, if they're clearly defining their learning targets, and if they really knew, as I wrote right here, how can this information lead to goals and expectations of our school and district as written in our CSIP of the high school and across our academic standards. So as you'll see, I put this on a Likert scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest of understanding and agreement. Okay, so I just broke this down. So go ahead and I think the next one is the questions. These were the 10 questions I asked, and I will read these because I think they're kind of important. I can explain why learning targets are essential to effective teaching and learning. I can describe the attributes of clear learning targets. I can classify effective, somewhat effective, and ineffective learning targets. I can classify the targets. I can explain how a standard translates into the targets. Every lesson needs a performance of understanding to make the targets crystal clear. Learning targets are the first principle of meaningful learning and effective teaching. Setting and committing to specific, appropriate, challenging goals, and improving teacher learning, and what students are actually doing during today's lesson is both the source of and the yardstick for school improvement efforts. Now, I will say this, and I was, when I was doing this, when I sent the first email out, our superintendent read the email, and she said, hey, throw a couple of these questions in there. And so I actually am giving her the results of this after this is over with, because she's kind of interested on where we go next year going forward with lesson plans versus learning targets, how we're implementing them, what we're not implementing, those type of things. And then we also had two kind of open-ended questions, and I thought these were really good. It was, how do learning targets help students become more engaged and empowered? And how do learning targets help teachers and administrators align their efforts to improve student learning? Okay, so I think I've given like 4 or 5 examples, and then one of the open-ended. So this is one. This is, I can explain why learning targets are essential to effective teaching and learning. Guys, as you can see, we had 25 out of the, what is that, 27, okay, 27 responses. 25 of them thought they really understood what, guys, learning targets are pretty hard not to understand, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, it's true. The implementation of it, some of that may not always be on point, but why we're doing it and why they're successful, this right here shows you our faculty understands that. Okay, what's the next one? I can classify learning targets by type: knowledge, reasoning, skills, product, and disposition. 20 of the 27 felt they could do that. And if you remember, guys, when we were doing this, it was that verb. What verb are you working on? Okay, is it, and that's why that comes into knowledge, reasoning, skill, product, and disposition. I was a little bit kind of like, what? When I saw that 7 people were kind of neutral on that. And so they weren't real sure if they could classify what they wanted to get across or how they wanted to get across a learning target. So I don't know if that may be some of the new people we've hired since we really put an emphasis on that. And if so, how can we, or what can we do to catch them up, to get them back to the 4 and 5 level? What's the next one, Ms. Cornett? I can explain how a standard translates into teacher targets and then into student-friendly learning targets. Again, 24 of the 28 responses are right there in that 4 or 5. And that is, are we putting this in student-friendly language? So when a student comes in, sees that in the corner of the board, do they know, oh, okay, well, we're doing our 2-step equations today, or we're going to continue working on geometric shapes, whatever the case may be. They understand what we're learning. Okay, so that was good. Learning targets are the first principle of meaningful learning and effective teaching. You can kind of see a mixed bag here. This one, to me, this was the one that really kind of shocked me. I wish I would have had a follow-up question, but well, then what is your opinion of the first principle of meaningful learning? That one really shocked me. I mean, it did. Again, if you understand that basic, simple language and explaining those verb words that you put in your learning targets, this should be a higher number. At least that's my opinion. That's kind of what I would think. What do you all think about that? Is that something?
Unless teachers were thinking content knowledge was the first principle.
When I took it, the word first made me not go with a 5. I did a 4 because in my mind the standards are first, because that's where I get my learning.
Gotcha. I understand that.
Yeah.
I was a little, that one kind of, I was like, oh, that's why I put that in there as an example. I'm like, okay, was that something I was asking? Is there a different opinion on that? That's why I'm doing this and sharing it. All right, good. So, and then this is where I thought I really got the knowledge, and I'm glad that part of this presentation was to have those two open-ended questions, because I got some really thoughtful responses. I was actually really surprised with how thoughtful and how much time our teachers put into these responses. I thought it was great. It says, how do our learning targets help teachers and administrators align their efforts into improve student learning? And I'm going to read this one to you guys because like I said, I was really impressed with our teachers and the thoughtfulness that they put into these replies. And it is, learning targets are an essential part of my teaching. The standards are so broad that they can incorporate as many as 10 or more learning targets. That might be a little much, but still, the thought that they put that much into a unit or a lesson just means that they know where they want to go with the lesson. The standard can be so broad that it takes an entire semester or even a school year to cover all these pieces that underlie the standard. Learning targets help to break the large standard down into daily learning targets. So as you can see, our teachers know what learning targets are. And I think they know how to effectively use them. But like I said, when I went through classrooms, not everybody was using them anymore. I think our teachers having this knowledge, and like I said, with how much time we spent, 2 years ago, really focusing on those learning targets, I think that has stuck with us. I just think going forward, I think it's something that we need to continue. I don't want to say harp on, because that almost means like you're kind of being very forceful with it, which you don't want that, but I think it's something that we need to continue to talk about in our PLCs and our PLTs and our department meetings. And it's something that we need to continue to focus on, not only for our own benefit, but more importantly for the student benefit. I cannot, and I know I've already said this 6 or 7 times, but you have to make sure your students fully understand, what are we doing today? Will they see the big picture for 6-8 weeks down the road? Maybe not, and probably not. But as long as they understand what they're doing today, then you're getting them on that increase of knowledge of the standard and the mastery of whatever skill they have. What's the next one there? The action plan. I put schools that implement the learning target method should have continuous, and that's what I've just said, should have continuous professional development through your PLCs on development of deliberate teaching through learning targets. And for Dr. Brumbaugh out there, I keep saying PLTs. We call them professional learning teams here in our communities. So the purpose of the daily learning target method is to have teaching be done in chunks for daily teaching, to be direct and attainable. It's something the student can attain every day. These teachers must be trained to understand the full implementation of any method that is asked of them to work toward mastery. In this case, promising to see high average scores on some of the rubric criteria, while allowing for targeted retraining or reteaching. Also, that's where that RTI piece comes in that we've been working on, of teachers to elevate any areas of concern. Action plan continued. Create team teacher leaders for assistance. Just continually be talking about that with each other. Department meetings when we get together. Daily learning target method. It's got to be monitored. That's something that, and I even said it again through here. We need to monitor it. Now, am I talking about our principals or district people coming in and doing that? Sure, they can do that every so often, but I think that's something I would kind of propose, either as departments or common plans. Just go in every now and then, maybe once every 9 weeks or twice every 9 weeks. Just go in and say, hey, got your learning targets up? Check. Awesome. How's that going today? If you want to have some discussion about it, go ahead and do that with them. But it's just something I think if we hold each other as teachers accountable, I think that's something that's easily monitored through your district or by your administration, holding each other accountable for it. You know, if we go in, if I as a special ed teacher go into Miss Cornett's class and just walk in and say, hey, you got your learning target. I see your target's up. That's what you guys are working on. You know, I think that stuff takes care of itself over time. And then just collecting that data. Have some kind of little check slip, whatever the case may be, some kind of rubric that they can go by to make sure that not only are they up there, but are they being driven by your standard and your curriculum. And this is kind of, I know it's small print, but these are some of just of the an action plan or the resources needed. I've got this rubric here. Is the target communicated? Is the target clear? Is the target measurable? Simple, easy things. You should be able, you know, to when you go check for these, it shouldn't take somebody 10, 15 minutes to sit there and see. You should be able to walk in and in a couple of minutes, literally a couple of minutes, be able to see these things. You know, because I understand, as somebody who's taught for 13 years, I know it is a little intimidating sometimes when somebody else comes and walks into your room with a clipboard and a pen and their glasses on their nose and come in and look at that's a little bit intimidating. So if you can come in and see all of those things in just a few minutes, you're in, you're out, it's easy, and yet you're still giving your staff, you're still giving your school and your district plenty of information that anybody can walk into that classroom and know what's going on. Okay? What else do we have? And then just a learning target checklist. I had the rubric, but I think if you were doing this is more beneficial. And I even added some of the same ones, but I'll even add this. Is the target congruent to the standard? You may not know that. They might not be something you're going to go in and look for when you go check for these things. Is the target, is it in terms that the students will understand? You know, if you know, as a special ed teacher who's been teaching resource language arts, I'm not going to use 14 syllable words that I don't even understand myself. So how am I going to expect my students to understand it? Something that is tangible for them that they can wrap their head around and understand. Is the target concise and clear? And back to that verb word. I can, in this, like I have this one right here, I can use technology, I'm using something or a skill to build on my knowledge, all right? Same thing, walkthrough tool that you can actually use if there's any kind of feedback you want to have there. You can easily write those things in. And I'll be honest with you, some of these things, I know this tool right here is the one that we have used in the past. And I just went in and just changed a little bit of the language, a little bit of the verbiage, but it's something that we have already done. I think going forward, we just need to kind of monitor that a little bit better and look at it, because like I said, I was really surprised when at the start of the semester, when I went in and told people at that faculty meeting, hey, I'm going to come around to classrooms. Like I said, I went there 6 times, and I was surprised with the teachers that had nothing up there. They were teaching away, the kids were engaged, but there was no target up there. So, and I think especially for low performing students or special needs students, those things, whether we think they are or not, are a big benefit to those students. They really are. So, what else we have? Summary, a better usage of learning targets. I think that's something we need to work on going forward. Stakeholders know and can define what learning targets are. Do our parents? Because, you know, is every parent going to come in here and want to know what a learning target is? Probably not. I'm not oblivious to that fact. But for the parents who are taking a vested interest, or even for the parents who don't take a vested interest, if they walk into a classroom or they need to see something, they can walk into a classroom and read, oh, they're working on figurative language, okay, or they're learning from pulling something from classroom texts. They'll understand that. They know that. It's good for those stakeholders or parents to understand that. Teachers overwhelmingly feel, my summary, overwhelmingly feel learning targets are meaningful. Like I said, that survey information, especially those responses I got, our faculty really do like learning targets, and they do think that they help. Going forward, I hope we think and we see that that those are a benefit, and I hope we push, whatever comes in the next little bit. I hope that that is something that gets used to not only our benefit as a teacher, but more importantly, those students. But they did say our overall opinion is they need to better define their own daily learning targets. Teachers did feel like, yeah, I have my learning targets up there, but maybe I keep the same one up for 3 or 4 days and don't change it as I'm teaching along. And then one thing that we got through that survey is faculty would like more direct usage of their PLT time to continue and strengthen common language. And that was one thing, Ms. Lovell, that I really thought was, I don't want to say disparaging or negative, but something I saw in there is we had a pretty good chunk of teachers who said they didn't use them effectively. And so what I told the committee here is, I thought that, we've had how many new teachers come in the last year and a half. I think that's something maybe we can, early in the year, we can spend time working with those new hires or new teachers, explaining the benefits of our learning targets or ICANN statements, however you want to claim them, and just explain the benefit to them and how that helps student learning. All right, that's what we have. These are just my references, guys. This is where I pulled all of this information. I'm not smart enough to pull all of this out myself. There was a place to look for this information. Anything else? Anybody have any questions, comments, anything? Well, I will say this, 2 years worth of work. The RTI process was the big bulk of all of this. And I just thought that directing these learning targets based off all the information I got from the RTI is a good way for those people to just build and grow on that. So I thank you guys, and we'll see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.